Good afternoon, everyone. Is my voice audible to you all?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Good
Good
afternoon,
afternoon.
ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon.
So, if I remember, last class we started with international business economics. This is a total different from what we have read in the last semester. We have talked more about economics from the microeconomics point of view, macroeconomic point of view. We were more concerned about production, distribution of the goods and services. So, when it comes to international trade, when it comes to international trade is about like import and export, and wherever like you will be having an advantage. Last class only I had talked about there is something called as absolute advantage and comparative advantage, which are the two most important concepts in understanding of economics as well as in understanding of international trade. Now, when I talk about absolute advantage in terms of cost, that is called as absolute cost advantage. Hmm. Arey. Absolute cost advantage. So when it comes to absolute cost advantage, it basically means that like if a country we say like they have an absolute advantage, or we call it as an absolute disadvantage, where we are looking it from a single product point of view. Like absolute advantage is something which looks after the efficiency of producing a single product. We say that a country's absolute advantage is there if that country is going on producing one particular commodity at a very faster rate, and it is also doing it for a higher profit. For example, if we take into consideration Japan and Italy. Now, when we talk about Japan and Italy, both of the countries are the countries which are into production of automobiles. But then when it comes to Italy, it can produce more of a sports car, but then they are of a higher quality, and then they are producing at a very faster rate, and they are selling it with a greater profit. So in this case, we can say like Italy is someone which is having an absolute advantage in that particular industry in compared with Japan. Now, for example, if you look after Japan, they have a very limited resources, and they have also a very limited manpower. But then what they have is they have a higher technology. So they are one country who are into more into production of electric cars. Now, when they are more into production of electric cars, they are producing at a very faster rate. They are producing at a very faster rate, and then they are trying to compete it with Italy's efficiency in production of, like as I said, Italy is more into production of sports car. So here they are morely into competing with Italy's efficiency. But if as an individual, if you are going to see, individual is Japan is having an absolute advantage in terms of producing electric cars, and Italy is someone which is having an absolute cost advantage in terms of producing a sports car. So when absolute advantage is referred or absolute cost advantage is referred, it is basically the superior production capabilities that we are talking about in a particular area. and and here we are just making a comparison about who is having a superior technology. Like for example, Japan is having a superior technology, but then they are having a limited resources and limited manpower, so they are more into production of electric cars. So here the absolute cost advantage will be if Japan is only going on to be devoted into production of electric cars rather than going on for sports vehicle. Similarly, if you take into case of Italy, which is a which is have a very higher quality, which is having a very faster rate in production of sports car. So Italy is one of such countries where it is having an absolute cost advantage in the production of sports car. So it should only focus on the production of sports car rather than going for any other kind of electric car or any other kind of car. So am I clear on the absolute advantage? Now we'll go for the comparative advantage. So when it comes to comparative cost advantage, it actually takes into view the holistic view. Like it takes into consideration the perspective, like why a particular country or why a particular business is into production of goods. If you remember, there is a cost called as opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the next best alternative that we have forgone while making a decision or while choosing a particular product. So in this comparative cost advantage, if you take into consideration the opportunity cost, it is actually a given option, and here it is like whatever benefits that we have forgone in order to choose. For example, if we are choosing to produce For example, if you are choosing to produce cars, if you are into production of automobiles, so what are the best alternatives that we could have produced if you do not have produced automobiles? So we need to make a comparison over here and we need to choose the best out of it, and that best should be weighing out more than what the opportunity cost is. जो हमने choose किया है, we should be weighing out कि अगर हम automobiles produce नहीं करते, then what are the other things which we could have produced in that. So वो जो हम एक्स वाई जेड प्रोड्यूस करते इन केस वी हैव नॉट प्रोड्यूस्ड ऑटोमोबाइल्स, द प्रॉफिट इन प्रोड्यूसिंग ऑटोमोबाइल शुड बी मोर देन द प्रॉफिट of producing x or y or z. If in generally, if I have to say, like, if there are two products which are identified and what is the profit out of them. Ma'am, please let me in the meeting. Okay. Now, if you have chosen two products and there is a profit, so we have to identify, we have to analyze, we have to calculate what is the cost that we will be incurring if we are choosing one option over the other. Now, for example, if we'll assume that China is one such country which has enough resources and it is moreover into producing of smartphones, tablets and computers. So China can produce in a day, China can produce 10 computers, China can produce 10 out smartphones, it can produce 10 tablets. But if we are going to see in terms of profit, China is earning more profit when it is more into production of smartphones. But then it is into production of computers also, it is into production of tablet also. So here the opportunity cost is the difference between, if China is only going to focus, like per day, if it is going to produce 10 computers, 10 smartphones and 10 tablets, so total production is 30. Now the opportunity cost is the best cost that is forgone, or the best alternative it has chosen. Now, in a day, if China is going to produce 30 smartphones, it is not going to produce any more computers and tablets. So the opportunity cost is the cost that is foregone. The cost that is foregone if it is only producing the 30 smartphones. The cost that is foregone in producing 10 computers and the cost that is foregone in producing 10 tablets. So when we talk about a comparative advantage, though it says like it takes into account a very holistic view, it actually takes into account the opportunity cost that will be incurred while going for a production. But then when it comes to absolute cost advantage is it just focuses on producing the superior production capabilities and add a higher profit. Now, where does this concept of absolute cost advantage and comparative cost advantage come from? It actually came from Adam Smith. Adam Smith, in his book called as Wealth of Nation, an inquiry into the nature and causes of wealth of nation, जो book है उनका, there he has argued that every country, in order to use the resources efficiently, they should produce the goods which they are specialized in. For example, if we say, like in India, we are very much specialized in production of textiles, then we should only focus in production of textiles and we should export those textiles, and rather we should import some other things. For example, every country, they are more specialized. आप अगर Spain को देखोगे, Spain is more and more they are into production of wine. If China को देखोगे, they are more and more into production of this electronic products. And if agar आप आप Japan को देखोगे, they are more into technologically strong. So according to Adam Smith, every country, if they specialize in whatever they are good into, or they produce most efficiently, they use the resources that is available to them, then they can produce that, they can specialize and they can produce that good very well. Then they will have to exchange it, they'll have to export, and they will bring in the country for the goods which they are deficient on. So this is actually a base on which your the trade theories are built upon. There are three trade theories that you will be reading in this chapter. One is your Ricardo's comparative advantage theory. The other one is your Heckscher Ohlin model or factor abundance, and the other one is your modern theory or intra-industry theory. So when it comes to your Ricardo's theory, how does it happen? It is a very normal and it's a classical theory. David Ricardo, one of the economists, and he has built upon his theory on comparative cost advantage. Now, when I say comparative cost advantage, it is like he has taken into consideration the opportunity cost. So what David Ricardo says that only on the basis of comparative cost advantage, the international trade will grow up. Now, for example, if a country that is specialized in that line of production, or where it is having a comparative cost advantage than other countries, then there it will depend upon the imports from abroad, and it will mostly focus on the exports from whatever the comparative cost advantage it is in. Last class also I have given you one example, a very small example. Suppose if you are taking into consideration India as well as there is another country, say if you are taking into consideration Bangladesh. So country India and country Bangladesh, both of them are into production of two goods, say commodity X and commodity Y. For India, for production of commodity X, it uses 12 laborers to produce one commodity X, and it uses 10 laborers to produce commodity Y. For Bangladesh, it uses 16 laborers to produce commodity X and 12 laborers to produce commodity Y. This is a labor cost per unit that I am talking about. Now, if you'll see, India is using lesser laborers for producing X and Y in comparison to Bangladesh. आप अगर देखोगे इंडिया के केस में कमोडिटी एक्स हो या कमोडिटी वाई प्रोड्यूस करने के लिए इट यूजेस लेसर, मतलब कम लेबर्स यूज करते हैं एज कंपेयर टू बांग्लादेश. But when it comes to Bangladesh, it uses more labor as compared to India. But then आप अगर देखोगे for commodity X produce करने के लिए Bangladesh uses 16 laborers and commodity Y produce करने के लिए it uses 12 laborers. तो यहाँ पे अगर हम देखा जाएंगे एब्सोल्यूट कॉस्ट एडवांटेज अगर हमें देखना पड़ेगा, एब्सोल्यूट कॉस्ट एडवांटेजेस जो कमोडिटी को हम सुपेरियर प्रोडक्शन करते हैं. ओके, तो इंडिया प्रोड्यूसेस कमोडिटी वाई, इंडिया प्रोड्यूसेस कमोडिटी वाई, मतलब 10 लेबरर्स लगा के वो एक कमोडिटी वाई प्रोड्यूस करता है. दिस इज अ सुपेरियर प्रोडक्शन इन केस ऑफ इंडिया. Similarly, if you see production of commodity X, commodity X का प्रोडक्शन अगर देखोगे इंडिया के केस में वो 12 लोगों को यूज करके commodity X प्रोड्यूस करते हैं, बट देन बांग्लादेश के केस में वो 16 लोगों को यूज करके commodity X प्रोड्यूस करते हैं. मतलब in terms of absolute cost advantage, India is ahead in terms of 4 units of labor. तो यहाँ पे अगर ट्रेड करने का होगा, like suppose India needs to do some kind of trade with Bangladesh. Agar both of the countries they have entered into a trade agreement, they have to do some kind of trade. So in this some kind of trade, अगर commodity X India produce करता है 12 लोगों को लेके, बांग्लादेश produce करता है 16 लोगों को लेके, तो Bangladesh is not in a very positive position of producing commodity X, but then India is in a positive position of producing commodity X. So in this case, commodity X is being produced by India with the help of 12 laborers, and commodity Y, जो कि India is producing it with 10 laborers, but then Bangladesh is producing it with 12 laborers. But then India अगर वो X में ले commodities. So here it does not mean that Japan will only specialize in production of rice and computers, because Japan is having a higher technology and it is producing both of them at a lower cost. and India is having nothing, but it will have to export क्योंकि India के both computer as well as rice it is producing at a higher cost. So in order to understand the David Ricardo's comparative cost advantage theory, what we can do is Japan being one such country which is using a higher technology, they can focus on producing rice at a very relatively lesser cost than computers. Then they will only focus into specialize in production and export of like they will only be focusing that they will only be producing rice, and they will not be utilizing their any kind of technology into production of other things. Whereas India, which is having a very less comparative advantage when it comes to production of rice, India will only specialize into production of computers, and there will be an exchange of rice and computers between both the countries. So this is what the theory states, but then they have a lot many of assumptions. The assumptions are like, the first assumption is there should not be any intervention from the government in the economic system. Matlab the economic system is totally, it will be based on the demand that is from the economies and supply from the economies. Agar India is having a higher demand of computers, then it will import more of Japan's computer, and if Japan is having a more demand for rice, then it will import more of India's rice. So it depends upon the economic system of both the countries, and there is absolutely no intervention by the government. Second is there should be a perfect competition that exists between the commodity and the factor markets. Perfect competition in the term, like if you are talking about India and Japan, it means the computers that are produced in India is same as the computers that is produced in Japan. It is the rice which is produced in India is the same as the rice which is produced in Japan, and every both of them, depending upon the comparative cost advantage that they are having, they will be selling that. It is not like इंडिया के दूसरे जगह पे आज अगर 40 रुपए में चावल मिल रहा है, दूसरे जगह पे 30 रुपए में मिल रहा है, देन वी विल बी कंसिडरिंग दैट 30 रुपए का चावल. ऐसा नहीं हो सकता. इट इज लाइक परफेक्ट मार्केट एग्जिस्ट बिटवीन बोथ द कंट्रीज. Okay, why are so many people leaving and joining? Okay, then the third assumption that we have taken is there are static conditions in the economy. Static condition matlab the factor supply, the techniques of production, and the test and preferences are all constant. When I say test and preferences, it means like एक महीने में अगर एक हाउस होल्ड को 10 किलो चावल जरूर इज द डिमांड और 10 किलो चावल जरूरत होता है, then that taste and preferences will remain the constant. This is not like उनका taste and preferences change हो जाएगा, चावल के बदले they will go for wheat. That cannot happen. There has to be a static condition in the economy. The taste and preferences, the supplies that are coming, and the techniques of production that will remain constant. Why they have focused on techniques of production remaining constant? It is because if our techniques of production increases, similarly our comparative cost also increases. We have to keep our comparative cost as a constant. That's why we have kept all these conditions as a static. Then the fourth one is the production function is of homogeneous. Like production function is what we have read it in the first semester economics. It is the input of what is the function of all the inputs that is given for producing a particular commodity. It implies that if you are taking that production function is homogeneous of first degree, it means that like the output changes is exactly in the same ratio as whatever input that we are putting. Like अगर हम 10 लेबर्स लगा रहे हैं तो उसका आउटपुट जितना रहेगा 20 लेबर्स लगाने पर एग्जैक्टली ट्वाइस उसका आउटपुट रहेगा. ऐसा नहीं कि 20 लेबर लगाने पर उसका आउटपुट 3 टाइम्स या 4 टाइम्स बढ़ जाएगा. If you are producing a particular commodity, say commodity X, by using 10 laborers, then if you are using 20 laborers, it will be 2 times of that commodity X. Then labor is the only factor of production, and the cost of producing a commodity is expressed in terms of labor units. It is not expressed in terms of money. Labor is being the only factor of production. For example, commodity X can be produced using 10 laborers. Commodity Y can be used producing 20 laborers. So whatever the cost of producing will be, it is expressed in terms of labor units. Then the other assumption is that labor is a perfectly mobile, matlab it can move within any parts of the country, and it is perfectly like within the country it can move, but it cannot go out outside the country. Like we say like Sneha, you have joined 4 times. Is something happening here? Sneha? You have joined 4 times. Is it something happening over here? फिर से वो आपका चालू हो गया क्या? किसी को निकालना, किसी को ये करना? Okay. So labor is perfectly mobile. We do not say like the labor from the east are hardworking, labor from the west are not hardworking. We assume that the rate of like the rate at which they are doing work is perfectly okay. Now the when you talk about the transportation costs are absent. Why do we say that transportation cost is absent? Because transportation cost is something which adds to the production cost, but then we are not considering the cost, we are considering the cost in terms of labor input. For example, the cost of production of X is 10 laborers. We are not considering any other cost over here. So the transportation costs are absent. There are only two commodities that has to be exchanged between two countries. We are assuming that there are only two commodities that we need. There are two commodities that we will be needing, and that has to be exchanged between two countries. Money is non-existent, almost like it doesn't have an existence, and the price of goods are determined on the basis of the cost of production. As we have assumed in the upper part, that cost of production is something which is measured in terms of labor units. There is full employment of resources in both the countries. There is no other way that resources are being diverted to use on any other part of the country. There is a full employment of those resources, and trade between the two countries are taking place on the basis of barter. Now when I say barter system, it means we are exchanging one good for another good. We are not dealing with any kind of money cost or any part of it. We are only dealing with the barter system. Now this David Ricardo's model is very popularly known as a two country, two commodity model. Since I have made you understand what is an absolute cost and what is a comparative cost, and we discussed about how this David Ricardo theory happens. But then this is not something which is happening today in today's world. This was something which was happening when there was a barter system. Today today it is more about like whatever absolute advantage we are having, and then today we have a government intervention in almost every matters, and then we have a kind of like just a second. Then we have a barter system, and we have our own rules and regulations on how the trade will be happening. The next is Heckscher Ohlin theory. This is like a improvement over the classical theory of David Ricardo. In case of Heckscher Ohlin theory, we talk about unlike that classical theory that we talked about, like the classical comparative theory, which didn't do us very satisfactory work. Like वो ऐसे कभी नहीं होता है. It was just a classical composition. We assume like everything will be set up, perfect competition सब रहेगा, and then that theory works, which is actually not the situation. But then this Heckscher and Ohlin, there are two people. They have started understanding that there are certain differences when it comes to comparative cost. Like एक कंट्री में ऐसा कभी भी नहीं होगा कि there is an equal qualification of the laborers. In ऐसा एक कंट्री में कभी नहीं होगा कि there are too much of laborers and there is no other natural resources. Now if we go country by country, there is something called as the जो factors of production है वो change हो जाते हैं. उनको factor endowments बोलते हैं. Like as per the different countries, there is a different factor proportions. For example, if you talk about India, we are more about labor intensive because we have a higher population. Similarly, we are an agricultural based economy because we have too much of agricultural lands, and we entrepreneurship is on rise but not much rise. अभी rise हो रहा है but इतना नहीं है. But then if you are comparing it with US, one of the developed economies, there they do not have much labor intensive. उनका जैसे labor में as such कुछ नहीं है. They are very much into capital intensive countries. They have strong techniques. They have entrepreneurship is quite developed in their country. So as and when the country changes, the factor proportions also changes. Okay, so there are many modern economists, they have tried understanding like why there is a change in Oh, okay. So हाँ मैं क्लास के बाद आती हूँ. So why the modern economists, they have an explanation of why this international trade has been offered by Heckscher and Ohlin, and they mainly call it as this is a modern theory of international trade. And they say that there is an equilibrium that happens. Equilibrium is when there is a demand and supply meets, the price of that particular commodity is determined. Okay, but then Heckscher and Ohlin says like by going out of a country, like that does not exist between, that doesn't exist any basic difference between domestic trade and international trade. They said कि international trade जैसे होता है domestic trade भी एक वैसा हो सकता है, and they have more focused on inter-regional trade. Inter-regional trade is, for example, if you know Punjab, one belt of Punjab is moreover into production of rice, and if you know Maharashtra, one belt of Maharashtra is more about production of wheat. So if there is an inter rice to Maharashtra, and Maharashtra will be giving more of its wheat to Punjab. Similar things happen when it comes to vegetables, like potatoes is moreover grown in Punjab and it is supplied to the other parts of the in other parts of India. If we'll go to the east, they have a different kind of fish and all those items which goes to the other part of India. Similarly, there is a western belt of Maharashtra which is also into production of peas and all those, and it goes to other parts of India. So this is called as inter-regional trade. Now, when we talk about inter-regional trade, we have to understand this, that this domestic trade, there is a cost, that is major cost that is present. That major cost is in terms of transport cost. So whenever there is a trade that is happening in international trade, when this transport cost adds up, there is a chance that regions being richer than other part of regions. But when it comes to trade between different countries, जब भी internal trade होता है, the currency does not changes. But when it goes to other countries, when we go for international trade, there is a foreign exchange that happens, and as well as there is a purchase, like there is a value rise in a particular currency, and then the purchasing power of a country as a whole increases. Okay, so like Olin first what he did is he tried regarding that there are different reasons, different nations has to be taken as different जब ट्रेड होता है ये बहुत सपोर्टिव रहते हैं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, India is very serious about the hand. India is very much, kind of like it has an advantage when it comes to handlooms. Handlooms मतलब if you go to if you go from Maharashtra, उसका जो पैठणी साड़ी है, if you go to south, the south का जो silk है, then if you go down to east also has their own traditional handlooms, cotton जो बोलते हैं, and then if you go down to Jammu Kashmir जो shawls वगैरह बनते हैं, it has a very traditional meaning. It has a very very strong custom that you talk about. But then these are the things which are demanded at a very higher price when it comes to many other countries, many developed countries. मतलब if you see कश्मीर के जो shawls हैं वो पश्मीना बोला जाता है. It's something of a matter of pride. It's something of a very high status good in England, UK में. It's a very high status good. Like if you have a pashmina, it is like it's a very high status good. It's a show off for them. But then if you talk about that in India, I guess half of our people would not know what a pashmina is. So here Olin has established like each of the countries, they have a different languages, they have a different customs, and these countries have to yes, these countries have to focus on what they will be doing at trading. So he has talked about a general equilibrium theory of value where the relative prices of those commodities are determined by the demand and supply of them. When I say demand and supply of them is supply of those commodities are actually very less rather than the demand. For example, the Paithani sari which I am talking about, the supply of those Paithani sarees is very less because it takes a particular amount of time to produce that sari, but the demand for those sarees are higher. That is why the cost or the price of them is higher. Similarly, you have to understand that the commodities that we are sending out for sending out for export, it is also determined, the price is also determined by the demand and the supply of them. And when we talk about the cost of production of a commodity, it very well depends upon the factors of production, like the whatever prices are paid to the factors of production and not only on one factor. जैसे कि हम पहले theory में देखे थे, the cost of production is determined on the basis of labor units, but यहाँ पे the cost of production depends upon the wages that we had paid to the laborer, the capital, the capital that we have invested, the loan that we have taken, the rent that we are paying for use of that particular land or that particular room. So all those factor prices, they determine that what would be the price of that particular commodity, and in turn they also determine the income to the factor owners. For example, if I am into production of something, if I have helped in production of something, it means whatever salary or wages of mine will be a factor income, which actually will channelize the demand for those goods. So this is actually Heckscher Ohlin theorem is there, but then they have certain forces, and their theory is also based on certain assumptions, like they have assumed like that there is different regions or there are different countries and they have different factor endowments. Like each time we go into an export with a new country, they have their own factor endowments. हम जैसे we are more into agriculture, we are more into labor. Similarly, there are countries which are more into they are more into capital intensive or they are more into machines. जैसे कि India and Japan, both of them are producing rice. But when it comes to India producing rice, it is producing more in terms of labor intensive production. And when it comes to more of Japan, it is into production of through machinery. So that is what we called as factor endowments. The different goods require different factor proportions. Like when I say different goods require different factor proportion, matlab this there are goods like if you talk about handloom that required more of a labor rather than capital, rather than machines. Then if you talk about computers and smartphones, those require more of a technology rather than labor. So these are the two bases, like the underlying forces, which actually determine their, their theory. So according to their theory, they say like there is one country, they will have to outweigh. Like for example, if they take two countries A and B, they have to understand if country A is capitally abundant or labor relatively scarce in labor. For example, दो country लेंगे जहाँ पे उनको समझना पड़ेगा कि जो कंट्री ए है वो लेबर इंटेंसिव कंट्री है या कैपिटल इंटेंसिव कंट्री है. मतलब इट इज मोर ऑन कैपिटल और लेस ऑन लेबर, या मोर ऑन लेबर एंड लेस ऑफ कैपिटल. सिमिलरली जो कंट्री बी है वहां पे भी उनको समझना पड़ेगा कि कौन सा है उसका, वेदर इट इज अ कैपिटल इंटेंसिव और वेदर इट इज अ लेबर इंटेंसिव. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, एज दे हैड सेड, लाइक देयर इज अ फैक्टर एंडाउमेंट्स दैट विल बी हैपनिंग. अगर एक कैपिटल ए कंट्री लेते हैं विच इज इनटू मोर ऑफ प्रोडक्शन ऑफ technological goods, more into production of smartphones, tablets, computer, and it is more about capital intensive techniques of production. So उसका जो भी production होगा, production cost will be relatively cheap because country A is abundantly rich in capital. Similarly, country B being one such country where it is into more about labor intensive productions, जहाँ पे वो labor use करके produce करते हैं, so whatever goods they are producing, it will be relatively cheaper in terms of country A. So country A will try and export all its country A will try and export all its computer to country B. Country B will try and export all its man-made or labor-intensive productions to country A. Okay. So ऐसा उनका production होगा country A and B. If country A is into capital rich, then it will moreover produce capital A product, reached products, and country B will produce more about its labor intensive products. So this is what the Heckscher Ohlin model has been given, but then those have been critically evaluated on terms like they have been told, both the economists have been told like you have made invaluable contribution to the international trade, though it has accepted that there is a comparative cost on the basis of which international trade is happening. But then यहाँ पे they have moreover focused like for a country which is rich in capital will gain more than a country which is weak in capital. Matlab it says like if you are talking about general equilibrium theory, if you talk about value in which both demand and supply condition determine the prices of goods and services. कंट्री ए सपोज जापान बहुत सारा कंप्यूटर्स बनाता है, मतलब उनका वहां पे प्राइस कम रहेगा, इंडिया को इतना सारा कंप्यूटर्स नहीं बनाता है, बट देन देयर इज अ डिमांड फॉर कंप्यूटर्स, इट डजंट हैव दैट मच ऑफ सप्लाई. सो व्हाट विल हैपन, इंडिया में कंप्यूटर के प्राइसेस ज्यादा हो जाएंगे एंड जापान में वो प्राइसेस कम होंगे. द सेम थिंग हैपेंस ऑफ आईफोन. आईफोन का केस अगर आप देखोगे ना, when you go outside, even like US may, if you purchase an iPhone, it is of a higher configuration, if it is of a higher quality, or if you say like it is more original and more suitable than what you are getting an iPhone which is assembled over in India, since because the demand for that product is higher and supply for that product is not available. That is why the prices are quite high. US में वो इतना high नहीं रहता है. Second reason why they have been criticized is they have always talked about inter-regional trade. They have always, they have never given a significant understanding of like India के अंदर अगर trade का एक रह जाएगा, for example, people will start exporting commodities to Odisha and they will start importing commodities to from Odisha, then there is a chance like in region के बीच में कुछ disagreements होगा, which in turn will have an external impact on the economy as a whole. So they have tried to discourage it कि inter-regional trade कुछ नहीं होता है. There is something like we'll go for international trade. Okay. Then the third significant point which they have tried to ignore is like the comparative cost that they have talked about. Ricardo was someone who was very much laid emphasis on comparative cost, but Heckscher Ohlin were there where they have focused more on factor endowments, factors of production rather than comparative cost. So this is how they have been criticized. And then they have, then there is a new theory that have come into existence. Like today, what they are seeing, today what we are studying in case of, international trade is something called as Chamberlain model, which I will take in the next class. I completed with the Ricardo theory. I completed with the Heckscher Ohlin theory. Chamberlain theories I'll be taking in the next class. So are you clear till now? Or did you understand anything? कोई है या कोई नहीं है?
Yes, ma'am.
So are you clear on? Yes. Are you clear on some points? Are you clear on this? What I said about David Ricardo theory and the Heckscher Ohlin theory?
Yes, ma'am.
Fine. I'll be once I complete, I'll be sharing the notes. So shall I leave now?
मैम एक क्वेश्चन है.
Yes, yes, बोलिए.
मैम अभी ये फॉर्म भर रहे हैं हम, तो ये माइनर मार्केटिंग ले रहे हैं, तो उसमें कौन से सब्जेक्ट लेने चाहिए मार्केटिंग के, मतलब जो पिछले साल स्टूडेंट्स ने लिए थे. तो अभी सर अमर सर नहीं है ना, अभी तो उनको पूछने वाले थे.
See, the combination is somewhat like this, that in core you need to have one core subject and two institute level subject, and then if it is taking a minor, then it will be one core and two institute level one institute level subjects. तो आप सब्जेक्ट्स देखिए ना, आपको कौन से ठीक लगते हैं उस हिसाब से आप सब्जेक्ट्स लीजिए. आपका स्पेशलाइजेशन क्या है?
फाइनेंस मैडम.
Finance and marketing. You want to take finance and marketing, is it?
यस मैम, यस मैम,
तो
मार्केटिंग इज माइनस।
फिनेंस में एक कोर सब्जेक्ट आप लिए होंगे और दो इंस्टीट्यूट लेवल सब्जेक्ट आप लिए होंगे।
यस
तो
मैम।
मार्केटिंग में एक कोर सब्जेक्ट लीजिए। मार्केटिंग का कोर सब्जेक्ट क्या है दोनों में से?
मतलब मार्केटिंग का कुछ ज्यादा पता नहीं है मैडम, वो अभी चेक कर रहे हैं, मतलब तो मतलब कौन सा लेना चाहिए ये पूछ रहे हैं, मतलब ये सब पता ही नहीं है सब्जेक्ट कौन से, मतलब
क्योंकि
क्या।
वैसे भी आपके मेजर वाले जो हैं वो दो सब्जेक्ट्स तो पढ़ेंगे ही पढ़ेंगे, तो आप डिसाइड कीजिए आपको कौन सा सब्जेक्ट अच्छा लगता है, उस हिसाब से आप सब्जेक्ट लीजिए। एक कोर लेना है और एक इंस्टीट्यूट लेवल लेना है।
ठीक है मैम, ठीक है, क्योंकि मैडम अभी ये एमसीक्यू हो रहा है ना एग्जाम की, तो उसके हिसाब से वो पूछ रहे थे
शायद
अभी।
आपका एमसीक्यू एग्जाम नहीं होगा शायद।
ओके ओके। हाँ मैडम, वैसा भी मतलब ऑफलाइन भी होगा तो भी प्रॉब्लम
हम्म।
नहीं आना चाहिए, ऐसे ऐसे इसलिए सब्जेक्ट कौन सा लेना चाहिए, ऑफलाइन अगर होता है तो थ्योरी लिखना पड़ेगा।
आप उस एंगल से मत देखिए, आप इस एंगल से देखिए ना, ये सब्जेक्ट पढ़ने के बाद आपको क्या स्कोप मिलेगा, आपको क्या अंडरस्टैंडिंग आएगा। और आप डोंट गो बाय कि आप एग्जाम में कैसे लिखोगे, रादर ये देखो ना, ये सब्जेक्ट पढ़ने पर आपको क्या स्कोप मिलेगा आगे आपके करियर में।
ओके मैम।
ठीक है। ठीक है then I'm leaving the class right now, okay? Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.